Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack fascinating sources, bringing you compelling stories, and maybe some unexpected insights along the way.
That's the goal.
Today, we're looking into two really remarkable people from Portland, Maine: Walter P. Griffin, who became this internationally known painter, and Alnah James Johnston, a truly transformative educator.
And what's fascinating is how their lives, though, decades apart and in very different fields, they ended up sharing these surprising connections. Global ambitions, too.
Absolutely. It's not just that they were from the same place. There are these threads, family ties, yes, but also a specific historic house that links them. It's quite a story.
It really is. And looking at their individual paths, well, it shines a light on broader history, too. You see how things like curiosity, art, education, this sort of global view, how it all came together. Rooted in Maine, definitely, but reaching much further.
That interwoven story,
Yeah.
that's what we want to unpack today. That's the mission, really, to explore this unique relationship between Walter and Alma, see how their convictions shaped their lives, and how their influence spread out. So let's start with the artist, Walter P. Griffin.
Okay.
Walter was born in Portland back in 1861. And think about it, 1861, right when the American Civil War kicked off. What a time to be born.
Absolutely turbulent. His family background is interesting too, tied to the sea, to Portland's maritime trades. His father, Edward Griffin, was a woodcarver, made ship figureheads.
Oh, wow, proper craftsman.
Exactly. And later he made molds for things like patterned glass, even cemetery statues. So Walter grew up around art, sculpture, that hands-on creation. Must have sparked something early on.
Clearly it did. He left Portland when he was just 17, wanted to be a sculptor initially. He studied in Boston at the Museum of Fine Art School, got a scholarship too.
Right. And took night classes with True and Bartlett. He was getting noticed early. He even got a commission back in 1882 for medallions at the State House in Boston. So, yeah, talent was there from the start.
He definitely had a knack. Then he moves to New York in 82, studies at the National Academy of Design, even wins a medal for figure drawing.
And he's making connections, befriending artists who'd become really big names like William Chase and Child Hassam. He even taught for a bit in New York at the Ethical Culture Society.
But he set his sights further, didn't he? Europe called.
It did. 1887, that was pivotal. He spent 2 years studying abroad, mostly in Paris, got into the École des Beaux-Arts, which was, the place to be.
Huge deal. And he exhibited at the Salon of 1889.
He did. Another big achievement. And he wasn't just hitting the books in Paris. He was living and painting out in the countryside, France, Italy, especially the Barbizon area.
Which was famous for inspiring American landscape artists, right?
Exactly. It clearly inspired him. He became this master impressionist painter, but with his own kind of unique method. People called it his secret technique.
Ah, yes. Tell us about that. It sounds fascinating.
Well, instead of mixing his colors on the palette like most painters did, he'd actually pick up two different colors on the same brush
Okay.
and then blend them directly on the canvas as he painted.
Yeah.
It created this effect. Critics just loved. They called it vibrating light
Vibrating light. I like that.
and rugous heaps of paint. Sounds very textured, very alive. They praised the resonance and purity of color, the sheer vitality of his work.
That sounds incredibly difficult to control, though, almost instinctive.
It suggests a really deep feel for color and light, doesn't it? A very immediate way of capturing a scene. And his work got shown everywhere, the Panama Pacific Exposition, big shows in New York, Philly, Boston. He became a National Academy member, won medals. He definitely made his mark internationally.
His personal life seems equally interesting. He married Lillian Baynes in 1899.
Yes, a British-born American journalist and photographer. They were married until 1908. And Lillian, she was quite the figure herself.
Really? How so?
Well, she was known for photographing royalty, celebrities, people like Winslow Homer, another Maine artist, and even Madeline Astor,
Madeline Astor. Wow, widow of John Jacob Astor IV from the Titanic.
the very same. So yeah, Lillian moved in prominent circles too. Their marriage connected Walter to yet another fascinating world.
Interesting connection. So after the divorce, Walter kept painting, kept teaching.
He did. He taught back at the Ethical Culture Society and was really important at the School of Art Societies in Hartford, Connecticut, director there from 1898 to 1907.
And he ran that summer school too, right?
In Quebec City, yes.
Yeah.
Walter Griffin Summer Painting School. The focus was on painting before nature, getting students outside, observing directly.
He seems like he really valued mentoring.
Very much so. Known for being generous, helping young painters, sometimes for free. Louis Orr was one of his students who became quite distinguished.
And even though he spent long stretches in Europe, 1909 to 18, then again 23 to 33, he always came back to Maine, didn't he?
Always felt that pull. He spent summers in Greenville sometimes, and his connection to Stroudwater near Portland became really important later on.
We'll definitely get to Stroudwater, but it seems he stayed connected even when abroad.
He did. And like in 1918, he invited his friend, the painter Rupert Lovejoy, to come paint with him at Stroudwater. Lovejoy wrote about Walter being hospitable, engaging, maybe a little lonely sometimes, but really appreciating company.
It raises that question, doesn't it? This international artist living in Europe, exhibiting everywhere. What kept drawing him back so strongly to Maine?
That's a great question. Was it just nostalgia? Or did Maine, that sense of origin, offer something essential to his art, even with his global focus? Maybe a kind of anchor.
And anger, I like that. And he sounds like quite the personality. You mentioned his wit.
Yes, described as a gentleman, very courteous, but with a subtle wit. There's a great anecdote involving him and John Singer Sargent.
Oh, do tell.
Okay, so Sargent painted a portrait for a family somewhere in southern New England, but the family didn't like how he painted the boy's mouth, wanted him to change it.
Ah, the client critique.
Exactly. But Sargent refused, said something like, "That's how I saw the boy." According to Walter, the family was so put out they stuck the portrait in the attic
No. For how long?
for 30 years. But eventually they brought it down. Walter told the story as a kind of testament to Sargent's artistic integrity, holding firm.
That's brilliant. Really shows Walter's own values, too, respecting that artistic vision. Okay, let's pivot now to Alnah James Johnston. Another Portlander, but born later.
Right, 1895, so the Gilded Age, a time of huge industrial growth, big social changes. Very different from Walter's starting point.
And her family history sounds pretty dramatic, too.
It does. She apparently grew up hearing stories about her grandfather, a shipbuilder. He lost his fortune when his last ship sank on its very first voyage. Tragic.
Wow. That sense of risk, maybe resilience, must have been part of her upbringing.
Could be. She went on to Wellesley College, graduated in 1918 just as World War I was ending. She later did some advanced courses at Harvard, too.
And her early career started in teaching,
Huh.
but then there was a detour.
A fascinating one. She taught at Bennett Junior College in Millbrook, New Jersey first. But then, yes, she had this brief but apparently promising acting career in New York.
Acting? Really?
Yeah. Got a great review for playing Haman in Antigone, so she clearly had artistic talents herself. Maybe could have gone down that road.
But she chose education, and then something even more adventurous.
Exactly. 1923, this was the life-changing move. She decided to go to China to teach English and direct plays at Yenching University in Peking, Beijing, as we know it.
Sponsored by Wellesley, her alma mater.
That's right. And she really felt called to it. She wrote, "I believe that there is nothing that could possibly contribute more to my life than 3 years in Peking." Just shows that deep curiosity, that drive for global experience.
And her descriptions of Peking at that time sound incredible, capturing the contrasts.
Oh, absolutely vivid. She wrote about seeing, gentlemen in silk gowns riding in rickshaws right next to coolies hauling heavy loads. Modern things like telegraphs alongside ancient sites like camels carrying coal into the city.
A world in flux.
Totally. And she was just captivated by it, all the architecture, the art, but also the people, their humor, their gentleness, as she put it. You can tell it made a profound impression.
And China was personally transformative too, right? That's where she met her husband.
It was. She met George Johnston, an American banker working there. They got married in Hong Kong.
And then they came back to the U.S.?
Eventually. They traveled the world for about 6 months first on a ship called the SS Esquilino. They returned stateside in 1928. And all that international experience, well, it clearly shaped her leadership style later on.
And Lee, she certainly did. Back in the U.S., she eventually becomes principal of Dana Hall School.
Yes, the fourth principal. In Wellesley, Massachusetts, starting in 1938. And talk about timing, right in the thick of the Great Depression with World War II looming.
Not an easy time to take charge. And didn't her tenure start dramatically?
It really did. The famous hurricane of 1938 hit right when she was starting. Apparently, she held her very first faculty meeting with trees crashing down outside and the wind howling. Talk about a baptism by fire.
Wow. But she steered the school through it all. The war years, too.
She did. Dealt with rationing, wartime anxieties, big social shifts. She seems to have fostered this spirit of resilience, but also gratitude, making Friday nights festive, celebrating simple things like having enough food, a safe place, friends and family, even during hardship.
That speaks volumes about her leadership. Practical, but also focused on morale.
Very much so. And she was a real visionary for the school, brought in impressive speakers. Eleanor Roosevelt visited Dana Hall during her time.
Eleanor Roosevelt, that's quite something.
Isn't it? And she pushed the school forward. Her global perspective from China and the war years, it led her to open up enrollment, bring in more international
And
students.
she played a role in integration too, didn't she?
A significant one. Through her friendship with Reverend Howard Thurman, the civil rights leader, she brought the first African-American student to Dana Hall. That was a courageous move at the time.
Absolutely. And she pushed academic boundaries too.
Definitely. Championed things like independent studies for seniors. She even lobbied colleges successfully to let top Dana seniors take freshman courses for college credit while still at Dana Hall.
Ahead of her time. And she modernized student life.
Yes, liberalized dating rules, things like that. Showed a real understanding of students' evolving needs. She wasn't just about academics. She was thinking about the whole person, preparing them for a changing world.
And she physically changed the school too, right? With new buildings.
Huge effort there. She led the planning, the fundraising for modern fireproof buildings. The big one was the new classroom building, dedicated in 1956. Someone called it the result of your dream.
A fitting tribute. She retired in '62.
June 1962, yeah, after 24 years,
Huh.
left a huge legacy. They named Johnston Hall after her in 1965. And much later, in '76, she published her memoir about China, The Footprints of the Pheasant in the Snow.
So she circled back to that formative experience. Okay, so we have Walter, the globe-trotting artist, and Alnah, the visionary educator with her own global chapter, both from Portland. How do they actually connect beyond that?
This is where that house comes in, the Stroudwater house.
Right. Tell us about the house itself first.
Okay, so back in 1925, Walter Griffin shared ownership of this place on Westbrook Street in Portland with his sisters. It wasn't just any old house. It was a colonial-era building, originally a bake shop from the Revolutionary era, over 150 years old even then.
A bake shop. Fascinating. And Walter turned it into a studio.
His summer studio, yeah, which really shows his appreciation for history, for place. He connected with its roots.
And it sounds like it had some amazing original features.
Oh, incredible. A big central chimney, 3 fireplaces, vaulted ceilings upstairs. And get this, the original sheathing boards were 24 inches wide.
24 inches, compared to what, 4 or 6 inches today?
Exactly. Just shows that incredible early craftsmanship. Walter loved the setting 2 views of the harbor, the Stroudwater River nearby, an old mill dam close to the old Boston Post Road, history all around it.
He even brought his international taste to it, didn't he? The French brocade.
He did. Decorated the inside with old brocade from Paris. And apparently he quite enjoyed his neighbor's sheep acting as lawnmowers. A lovely mix of local charm and continental flair.
He saw it as a place for artists.
Yeah, he envisioned it as a mecca for visiting artists and sculptors. Fits right in with his known hospitality, that desire to mentor and connect.
So Walter owned it with his sisters. What happened then?
Well, in 1932, just 3 years before he passed away in 1935, he deeded the house fully to his sister, Eleanor M. Griffin. Walter didn't have any children, so Eleanor was his main heir. And the records sometimes identify her as Eleanor M. Proctor.
Proctor. Okay, that name sounds familiar from Alnah's side.
Exactly. This is the crucial link. Walter's sister, Eleanor M. Griffin, married a man named Charles F. Proctor back in 1895.
And Charles F. Proctor was?
Alnah James Johnston's uncle. He was the brother of her mother, Alnah L. Proctor James.
Ah. So that marriage makes Walter P. Griffin Alnah James Johnston's great-uncle by marriage.
Precisely. It's not immediate, but it's a definite family connection. And there's more proof, too. A portrait of Walter, taken later in his life, was published in 1971, the credit line. His niece, Mrs. George Johnston.
Alnah herself took the photo, or at least owned it and provided it.
It seems so. It strongly suggests she knew him, or at least knew of him well, and valued that connection, that legacy.
And the house connection gets even stronger, doesn't it?
It really does. Decades go by after Walter's death. Then, in 1964, who buys the Stroudwater house from Eleanor M. Proctor?
Let me guess. Alnah and her husband, George.
You got it. Alnah and George Johnston acquired the historic home.
Wow. So the house passed from Walter to his sister Eleanor, who is Alnah's aunt, and then to Alnah herself.
Exactly. George sadly passed away just a year later in 1965. But Alnah kept a life estate, meaning she had the right to live there for the rest of her life.
And she did.
She lived in that historic Stroudwater house until 1987. And there's even a receipt from 1974 related to Walter Griffin's estate that shows Alnah, Mrs. George Johnston, involved in the financial side of his artistic legacy.
So she wasn't just living in his former house, she was actively connected to preserving his legacy too. That's powerful. It truly ties them together across the generations.
It really does. The house becomes this tangible symbol of their intertwined stories. And think about Alna's lifespan, born around the Spanish-American War, lived through 2 world wars, the Cold War, saw the dawn of the digital age, dying just as the Cold War was ending. Like Walter's life spanning the Civil War to the Depression, she embodies this huge sweep of history.
So bringing it all together, Walter the artist, Alnah the educator, born decades apart, different careers. But the common threads are undeniable.
Absolutely. That Portland upbringing, the direct physical connection to the Stroudwater house, and that family tie forged through Eleanor and Charles Proctor's marriage.
And beyond the facts, there's a shared spirit, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. You see this intellectual and artistic curiosity in both. Walter mastering painting, Alnah excelling in literature, drama, and then educational leadership.
And that global perspective is huge for both. Walter living and painting across Europe, Alnah's transformative time in China that shaped her whole outlook and career.
Right. They both engaged deeply with the wider world.
Yet there's also that reverence for place, for history. Walter restoring the Revolutionary-era house, Alnah choosing to live there for decades. It's like their global view didn't erase their local roots. Maybe it even deepened them.
That's a great way to put it. And the commitment to education, to mentorship. Walter helping young artists, Alnah's entire career dedicated to shaping young minds and reforming education. It's a powerful parallel.
And just a sense of independence, right? Personal conviction. They both pursued paths that weren't necessarily conventional, and they made a real impact.
They absolutely did. Their story, it's more than just biography. It's this picture of 2 lives connected by threads of family, place, and this shared spirit of ambition, curiosity, and maybe a sense of duty too. All anchored by that house, but animated by these big global experiences.
So to recap, Walter Griffin, the painter whose work resonated internationally, and Eleanor James Johnston, the educator who brought a global vision to her school. Separated by time, but linked by family, by that special Stroudwater house, and by these shared values, curiosity, global thinking, and a real commitment to leaving a legacy.
And it really makes you think about those connections, doesn't it? How something seemingly indirect, like being a great uncle by marriage, can lead to something so concrete, sharing a historic home decades later.
It suggests that these family ties, even the slightly removed ones, can transmit more than just genes or property. Maybe they transmit a certain spirit, an outlook, like that ambition, that international perspective passed down or shared across the generations.
It's a fascinating thought. What invisible threads connect us to people in our own family histories, even ones we never met? What ambitions, what perspectives might have been passed down in subtle ways?
That's the provocative thought to leave you with. What hidden connections might exist in your own history, and what unexpected stories or shared legacies might they reveal if you look closely?